Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Nykirk, the director of the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at Northern Kentucky University, one of the partners in the Northern Kentucky Forum, along with the public library districts in Boone, Kenton, and Campbell County. The forum is committed to civil civic dialogue on matters of public interest, and tonight we have another topic. We'll be looking at redistricting, something that you probably know happens every 10 years after the federal census. A very important process in our democracy, and tonight we'll learn about it and how we can have a voice in it. Before we get started, I want to tell you about a little piece of breaking news at your university at NKU. We learned on Friday from a national survey that our students are registered at a percentage of just over 88%, which is very high. Been going up since it's been tracked in 2012 as part of a national effort to see how college students are doing at registering and voting. So I know that our region, and all of you know as our audience and Northern Kentuckians, that sometimes we think we're a stepchild in the state, but if you want to be heard, this starts with voting. And so maybe this bodes well for the future as our young people understand that step one in the democracy and participating in the democracy is to register and vote. So that's a piece of good news, and I think pertinent to tonight's topic as we look at how we are represented in Frankfort and Washington and how the districts are drawn to do that. We're pleased to partner with the League of Women Voters, which has a new chapter, just celebrated its 1-year anniversary, a new Northern Kentucky chapter. So welcome to Northern Kentucky, I think actually back to Northern Kentucky, to the League, and it's the forum's privilege to partner with the League. And I'd like to turn it over to Becky Jones, the coordinator for the Northern Kentucky chapter, to get us started. Becky.
Thank you, Mark, and good evening, everyone. I'm Becky Jones, coordinator for the League of Women Voters of Northern Kentucky. Welcome to our Fair Maps Forum. We're honored to co-host this event with the Northern Kentucky Forum. This webinar is being recorded and after tonight can be accessed along with all of the League's previous forums at LWVKY.org. As Mark mentioned, the federal government conducted a nationwide census in 2020. State legislatures across the country now have updated population data that will affect how they go about fulfilling their legal responsibility to ensure that federal, congressional, and state legislative districts fairly represent all citizens. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, 101-year-old grassroots organization. We believe voters have a critical role to play in democracy, and we're dedicated to ensuring and protecting, among other things, safe and secure access to the ballot box for all U.S. citizens. That's why the League of Women Voters of Kentucky, a volunteer organization, has been holding this series of Fair Maps forums across the Commonwealth. We believe that Kentucky legislators need to hear what we, the people, have to say about the upcoming redistricting process. In every congressional district in our state over the past 2 months, the League has been sharing potential maps with audiences and listening to what citizens like you have to say about them. Do you want fairly drawn maps with fairly drawn districts? Do you want districts that represent all citizens? What should those districts look like? Do you want to elect legislators who represent you, or are you content to be gerrymandered into districts that serve the interests of politicians or political parties? Sadly, gerrymandering has been a part of Kentucky's redistricting process in the past. You'll see its effects in some of the existing legislative maps that we'll show you tonight. But let me say this, there's absolutely no good reason for gerrymandering to continue in our future. The League believes that all citizens' voices matter. So I thank each one of you for taking the time to join us for tonight's webinar. Let me suggest one more thing you can do. Go to the League's webpage at LWVKY.org and sign our petition asking legislators to be fair and transparent with the public in redistricting. Citizens have a right to see, consider, and comment on the legislature's proposed maps before legislators vote on them. Ask your friends to sign the petition too. It's quick and it's easy. And if we don't speak up, we won't be heard. Now, let me share a few helpful instructions on participating in this forum. First, please use the Q&A function on your screen to submit a question or make a comment anytime during the presentation. League members Jennifer Fitch and Cindy Heine will be monitoring the Q&A to share your questions and comments with the presenters in real time. And second, we suggest you set your monitor to full screen and speaker view in order to see more clearly the maps that we'll be discussing. Our presenters tonight are Kentucky League members Karen Brown and Susan Perkins Weston. Karen is a member of the Northern Kentucky League and lives in Union. She serves on the State League's Redistricting Committee and chairs the State Membership Committee. Karen Brown is a retired healthcare professional. Attorney Susan Perkins Weston is a member of the State League's Board of Directors and has dedicated considerable time and effort as the Redistricting Committee's map developer. Susan joins us tonight from her home in Danville. Karen and Susan, now I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Becky. I've been doing these forums around the state for the last month, and I'm very happy to be a presenter in Northern Kentucky, my home part of the state. So just a couple of basics about redistricting. After every federal census, redistricting is the process where state legislative bodies redraw boundaries for congressional and state legislative districts. Using the 2020 census data, Kentucky will redistrict 6 congressional seats, 38 Kentucky Senate seats, and 100 Kentucky House seats. This census data is also used for judicial, city, county, and school board seats. It's important to remember that this year, in the past 10 years, Kentucky has had a growth in population, about a 3.5% increase. We now have approximately 4.5 million residents in the state. That allowed us to keep our 6 congressional seats, unlike Ohio, which had a population loss and they had lost 1 congressional seat. So when will official redistricting happen? It could happen this fall of 2021, but it will require a special session to be called by the governor. We're not sure if that's going to happen. There's been some rumors, but as of yet, that special session has not been called. They could wait until the General Assembly sits for their regular session in January of 2022. But that will require redistricting to be done prior to January 7th, which is currently the filing deadline for future offices. Excuse me. What could happen is they could move that January 7th filing deadline back for a few weeks or months, but that's not sure. They can also address redistricting later in the session, February, March, or April of 2022, but that will mean that the districts will be set for the 2024 elections. Redistricting can make it easier or harder for voters to learn about candidates. It's always easier to learn about candidates if they live in the general vicinity of your home. That is why the League supports compact, sensibly drawn districts. It also can make it easier for citizens to communicate with their representatives. When your representative lives within a half a day's drive, then you are more likely to see that representative appear at your public town meetings and other functions. Redistricting can make it easier or harder for parties to compete against each other. This is where the term gerrymandering is so often brought into play. Parties can draw district lines that make it very hard for the other party to compete in districts. That is the definition of gerrymandering. This is something that the league has not wanted to see happen again in the state of Kentucky, and we acknowledge that it has happened in the past. It can also make it easier for members of racial minorities to elect candidates they prefer. And very important, I think, in a state like Kentucky, is regions within a state to get distinctive interests considered. Last week, we had a forum in Pikeville in Eastern Kentucky, and they have a distinct interest as they are part of the Appalachian area of our state. I think those of us who are citizens and live in the Northern Kentucky area, we think we have distinctive interest, and we want to have those interests spoken to in Frankfort. So why should you or anyone really care about this? One of the most basic tenets of the League of Women Voters is that voters should elect their representatives rather than elected officials selecting their voters. And again, that goes back to gerrymandering. It has happened in the past all over the country, both parties, where elected officials have drawn district lines choosing their voters based on party registration data. What they have done many places is create what they call safe districts. And these are districts where they are drawn so that the district is packed with voters of their party. This pretty well assures them a safe seat. And it puts greater emphasis on a primary election than on a general election. When a primary is the most important election and more important than the general, we find we get elected officials who don't have to compromise, they're in a safe seat, and it can lead to polarization and gridlock. Another result of gerrymandering can be poorly drawn lines can lead to costly lawsuits, the latest of which was in 2012. And I think from what we've heard, everyone in the state legislature would really like to avoid more lawsuits. So what's the best approach to a fair process? Well, we consider the best to be an independent commission. And this is where independent citizens serve on a commission, draw lines, and make their maps the preferred map to state legislators. That is not possible in Kentucky without a constitutional amendment, and we really don't see the likelihood of that happening. The next best is an advisory commission. And this is where citizens serve on a commission and they draw maps and in an advisory capacity, recommend these maps to the legislature. That has been rejected in 2020 and 2021. So the best practice we're left with now is a commitment to a transparent process with public hearings and input. In the 2021 session, there was a House Joint Resolution 61, which called for public hearings and a transparent process. This also was rejected. So what the Kentucky League of Women Voters decided in late 2019 is that we would draw district maps using map making software and the 2020 census data to draw maps that we think are fair and simple. And by doing this, we can inform Kentuckians about what a fair and simple map can actually look like. We wanted to advocate for these maps and show these maps across the state, get public input so we could have discussions with legislators and other citizens when it's time for the legislators to draw a final map. We've been gathering input at these events across the state, and we will develop what we call recommended maps to share with the legislature later this fall. So there are legal rules that have to be followed in drawing our maps. We are so fortunate to have a constitutional lawyer, Susan Perkins Weston, to be our map manager. So the first and most important law is one person, one vote. Congressional districts must be very, very close to perfectly equal in population. With there being a population of 4.5 million and we have 6 congressional seats, each congressional district will have approximately 750,000 citizens. For the Kentucky Senate and House, all of these seats must be within 5% of perfectly equal size. There must be districts of opportunity where minority voters have a chance to select representatives of their choosing. The Kentucky Constitution states that Kentucky Senate and House districts cannot divide counties except when needed to create nearly equal districts. In addition to those 3 very important legal goals, the league developed some additional goals, and one of those was compact districts. We tried to have parts of every district be within easy reach of one another. This is very important not only in Northern Kentucky, but other parts of the state where districts are in rural areas and could be quite large. County seats. When we divided a county, we tried to create a district that was inside the county and included the county seat. So in the past, when district lines have been drawn, it wasn't unusual to have a community divided into 3 different districts. The Hopkinsville League of Women Voters, in their forum, they talked about how the community of Hopkinsville was divided into 3 different House districts. That meant that you could live in one part of Hopkinsville and have 1 representative. You could work in another part of Hopkinsville and that be represented by a 2nd representative. Send your children to a school that's in a 3rd district. So we have succeeded most of the time in being very cautious and careful about dividing counties and tried very hard not to divide county seats. We have drawn our maps with indifference to incumbents. We have designed districts to fit the rules and additional goals without considering the current address of current legislators. We also do not use party registration, numbers or data in drawing our maps. So here we have a map that shows the population changes that have occurred in our state since 2010. Again, we had a 3.5% increase in population that wasn't evenly spread across our state. Those of us in Northern Kentucky are well aware of what sometimes feels like explosive growth in the past 10 years. So you see that Boone, Kenton, and Campbell all had growth in population. That growth kind of follows the I-75 interstate corridor from Northern Kentucky all the way down to the Tennessee border, with increasing growth in Scott, Fayette, Madison, all the way down to Laurel and Whitley County. In addition, there's been growth in the Louisville area, the I-71 corridor, and especially the corridor from Louisville to the Tennessee border below Bowling Green, I-65. They have also had major growth in the past 10 years. Susan, are you ready to show us your maps?
Here I am. Good evening, and it's a delight to be with you. I'm going to try to take you through 3 levels of maps, starting with congressional, which is the easiest to look at, then looking at the state house, which is the most challenging, and winding up with the state senate, which isn't Goldilocks, but is in between easiest and hardest. This is Kentucky's current congressional map showing the 6 districts that were drawn using the 2010 census data and from which our current members of the US House are elected. I want to invite you to look at it for a minute and just see what strikes you as sort of worth asking questions about. And after you've had a look, I'll offer some opinions and try to explain a few things. I'll also invite you to use the Q&A to start throwing questions at me. So in this map, I think the yellow districts are the ones that catch attention. That's the Northern District, the 4th district that includes most of Northern Kentucky, and also the 1st district, which one could describe as going all the way to the Mississippi, but you could also describe as going well into central Kentucky, running along the Tennessee border, below Bowling Green, and coming all the way up to within 10 miles of where I'm sitting tonight in Boyle County. I think that district is probably best understood in terms of wanting to have Warren County with Bowling Green and Daviess County with Owensboro in it in the same district. And once you commit to that, places west of there don't have enough population, and you have to go south and east in order to make a district work. The 4th congressional district is not as confusing in shape, but it is awfully long and awfully skinny with a stretch running from Ashland into Jefferson County on the outskirts of Louisville. I think that's a demanding district to run from, to seek election from, or to seek to communicate if your legislator lives at one end or the other. I do think almost all of this is driven by the combination of how the Appalachian 5th district was drawn and how the 1st district was drawn, and everything else was, okay, how do we make the rest of it work? But I can show you variance, and on our way to looking at variance and how we tried to make this simpler for voters, we want your input. And I want to share the couple of ways you can provide input. We have set up a survey at that Tiny Earl address. And the point of the survey is for you to be able to give answers systematically. It does ask for your email address. We're not putting that email in any database other than the one where we track comments. We won't use it to communicate with you other ways. But it will help us if you give us comments now and come back later and want to add more comments to sort of connect. This is the same person sharing thoughts. There are other options. You can use the Q&A function during the forum. If you prefer email or to write a longer set of notes, you can use info@lwvky.org. And if you want to come back later with thoughts, that Tiny Earl address will be open through at least November 15 before we start absorbing all of the input and trying to work out where we should be revising maps in response to what other citizens tell us. So that's a set of options.
Susan, before you move to your maps, there's a question. I appreciate your explanation of District 1, except for why District 2 is not further east so that I wouldn't have a panhandle.
The goal, if you look at District 1 and look at where it goes farthest west, that's Daviess County and Owensboro. And the district has to be drawn to have Daviess County and also have Warren County in it, after which something weird is going to happen with that panhandle effect. It probably could go further east and not have that pulling up north, and it would look even more like a long dragon. But as long as legislators are trying to keep that Owensboro and Warren combination together, something very odd is going to happen to the district in the west. I don't think it's crazy to think of Bowling Green and Owensboro as having a similar culture. As Kentucky smaller cities go, they have robust industry, they have robust commerce. They probably think of themselves as having a lot in common, but it's getting harder and harder to draw the map to work for anyone else while trying to keep them together. And I suspect that's going to end in this round of maps. So let me show you here's our attempt to draw districts across the same territory. And the first big move is, in fact, to move Daviess County into the Western District. And as soon as that happens and a couple of its neighboring counties are moved, it's possible to draw a district that's basically all west of Bowling Green. After which, a yellow southern district that also touches the Tennessee border and runs up north close to Louisville is possible. There's still a clear Appalachian district in purple, and the northern district can become more compact. It no longer stretches over to Boyd County. What really happened there is like rotating that district, all staying within Appalachian counties, but where it used to run from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock on a clock, it's now running from 7 up to 1. And that allows the northern district to be more compact and include 2 districts in from the Ohio River and 2 counties in from the Ohio River, and sometimes 3. That's our attempt. And then the central district needs to exist to include our second largest city, Lexington. They're in pink, but it's also drawn to make all the districts that are touching the state borders work within Fayette County. It does have each of the counties contiguous to Fayette County included in it, and then some others to get to the right size. I'm going to show you a few close-ups here. This is Jefferson County. Jefferson County is too large to be a congressional district. It has about 780,000 people when Kentucky districts are now supposed to be about 750,000 people. So it has to have something nibbled away. And in this version of the map, there are 2 nibbles taken. In the south, there's a small section taken off to make the southern district the right size. And to the northeast, there's a little section that is added into the northern district in the territory where y'all are likely sitting. When I could do it, I made these maps using boundaries you can recognize. And yes, the boundaries in that blue slice really are 64 and the Snyder coming into the county. That's not a perfect way to decide how to set borders, but thinking about citizens trying to talk about how their district works, those are awfully familiar boundaries most people need to know, the way rivers can be in other parts of the state. Here are the 3 other counties that got split to make this work. Grayson County in the west got split between the western and the southern districts. Harrison County got split between the central and the northern districts, moving to those districts being nearly the right size. And then the final move was dividing a small section of Montgomery County off to move that into the central district to get to the sizes being fundamentally where they ought to be. I should,
if you want to back up to that, to your proposed map, there's another question. I've shared this map around since it first came out. The main complaint that I've received is that Frankfort is separated from the Lexington district. What was your thought process in separating those cities?
I agree that from the perspective of people I know in Frankfort and the voices we've heard, it would be better to have Franklin County in the central district. But I could not find a way that made the other districts work right to get the right size. If you think about pulling that out and putting it in the central district, you'd have to push the northern district even further south. It'd have to pick up Nelson County or part of Bullitt County. Or I guess you could divide Jefferson County in a more awkward way for Jefferson County. But it really was trading off the different places to get close to equal size and some compactness. All the other parts of the map went strange if I tried to move it. Although it's certainly an example where if someone else saw, or if when I look at it again with all the input, I see it, I think it makes more cultural sense for that county thinking about it alone to think that it would fit better in the central district. That was a genuinely tough one. We'll see a couple of other things that I found tough, but ended up thinking balancing the different parts would work. But that's a very valid criticism, and I'm really glad to have it because it's exactly what people should be pointing out. I do want to mention here, in drawing these draft maps, we use the districtr.org software to map the districts. And that's free public software that gives us color maps. And it didn't break down over Labor Day weekend. That's why I was using it. It lets us get close to exactly equal districts, but not quite close enough. So when we come back to do recommended maps using the input we're gathering in these forums, we're going to use the Maptitude software. That's exactly what the legislature uses. And that will allow us to assign individual census blocks and really get to the kind of precision that's called for in congressional maps. That'll be a matter of moving 100 voters here and there. But the software was saying, you have to move 200 one way or the other. And that didn't let the districts balance out quite as closely as they should have. So that's an additional reason we'll have a few revisions.
So Susan, here's one more question about those maps. Could you put Scott County and the northern 2 counties of the central district, the whole and the divided one in the northern district?
Ask me again so I can listen.
Okay. Could you put Scott County and the northern 2 counties of the central district, the whole and the divided one, in the northern district? That would be
Susan,
trying to shuffle Franklin County.
Susan, I looked at this also, and I think the challenge is the growth in the state has come down the I-75 corridor. So Boone, Kenton, and Campbell had growth. Grant County had some, but Scott County, I believe, had the second highest growth. When you go into Scott County, you're going to be taking a considerable number of citizens out of the central district. And where are you going to find a replacement for that population? I think that kind of applies to Frankfort too. I think this is going to be a very challenging draw.
Let me pause and say, this is the best feedback we've gotten so far in terms of really thinking about the detail. And yes, it would get close to working to swap where Scott County is and Franklin County is. It would mean that a county that is actually contiguous to Fayette County isn't in the district that includes Fayette County, but it might be culturally more satisfactory. And Scott has more people than Frankfort, but not by 50,000, more like 10,000. So it probably would be possible to wiggle it around. It would not look quite as compact. It might still, let's say the central district would not look as compact, but that is genuinely thinkable. So let me say, how interesting. Thank you. And I'll move on to having a look at the House districts. The House map is a hard one to look at this scale. This is mainly a marker to let you see how it looks in the official version. And I'm going to show you some zoom ins on it to help you think about how this has worked and how the 2010 data was used. So moving in, here's a first look at the most northern Kentucky counties, the ones that were large enough to be divided. And just to sort of summarize this, Boone has 2 districts that are entirely inside the county, the 66th and the 60th. And then it shares 2 with parts of Kenton. Both the 63rd and the 69th are crossing the county border. And then there's another district that you can only see a little bit of down at the bottom in Boone County, but District 61 has parts of both Boone and Kenton, and then also has parts of Grant and Scott. Kenton has an internal district, shares 2 with parts of Boone, shares another with parts of Campbell, and shares another with Grant, Scott, and Boone. This, to me, looking at it without having known all of the history, looks like people had to have been maneuvering for reasons that could be about genuinely shared culture, but could also definitely have been about political advantage. And if you look at the 67th district running through northern Campbell County, that's quite a line to connect places. So that's a first look at the districts you're living with. And where is my cursor? I want to show you a little bit about what that 61st district there in southern Kenton and southern Boone looks like. Because it actually stretches like this down into Scott County. So it's a complicated set of lines in Kenton, it's a complicated set of lines in Scott. And yes, where the pink and the blue come together at the southernmost part, that's inside of Georgetown. It's an example of a county seat that was tangled up. And I don't want you to think this is quite how it works, because actually you can see that blue and that yellow district in Scott County. And those are actually attached to Harrison and Pendleton and to Owen and to part of Fayette. And purely for, this is a complicated map, I'll add that these are the places that are connected to Fayette. What's happening here, and I'm going to go back to the Scott version as a much simpler thing to look at here. What's happening is our state Supreme Court has ruled that you cannot divide counties unless you have to. So there's a priority given to making combinations of small counties any place you can. And then if it's not the right size, map makers are kind of under orders to draw lines that take little bites out of the larger counties. The question to me when I started working on drawing state district was, does it have to be this complicated? Does it have to have this many twists and turns and boundaries that are hard to remember? And I don't think it has to be this complicated, at least if you take out both directly thinking about partisan distribution and you take out thinking about where incumbents currently live. Now I have two requests. Can I show the current map and proposed map side by side? I can't do this with this technology. Because we're set up with the screen being fully occupied with one slide. I'm sorry about that. It's why we're making sure we send you handouts so that you have the option of looking at the maps either while we're talking or after the session to do comparisons and give us more feedback.
Susan, did you see the second question?
Tell me about it.
It's more of a comment, but the
Okay.
current District 4 is an excellent representation of a salamander, gerrymandering. The three counties across from Cincinnati have not been adequately represented with such a wide area. The proposed district is more compact and contiguous, and having Frankfort in this congressional district will be an advantage and enhance our visibility.
Okay, that is a helpful counter in thinking about working with Franklin County. Okay, I'm going to try to move on to see, having shown you this collection of what I also would say are like salamanders, though maybe baby salamanders wrestling one another. Let me try to show you another way this could be done. I should say first, in doing our draft maps, we did them in regional sections so that it would be easier to show them and zoom in. And for tonight's session, we've shared in the handout three regions, northern, of course, but also the central region and Jefferson, and we'll have a brief look at those, but focusing quite appropriately, I think, on northern Kentucky. So here's our effort to work with the northern Kentucky counties. It's still not super smooth looking, but I think it's noticeably more compact. So in this version, Boone has 2 internal districts and shares just one with Kenton, and also shares another with Gallatin and Grant. Kenton has 3 districts that are entirely inside the county, shares one district with Boone, and shares one other with Bracken and Pendleton, taking in the southern part of the county. And Campbell County was the right size to simply divide in 2, with very similar population, but of course, different size because the density is located in the north. This was an attempt to make it simpler for people to follow. You can also see it'll be really nice to be able to divide put single census blocks into districts, because there's some clumsiness in a couple of places here that could be smoother and easier to work with. To show you how this stretches out across the region, you can see the districts I mentioned that include a piece of Boone and that include a part of Campbell, but then just 2 for the immediately nearby region, 1 to the east and 1 to the west. We're aiming to do it with districts that look coherent to people more often. And I think this is at least easier to look at and think about than what the legislature came up with last time. The legislature who drew the last maps were primarily the Democratic House making the choices. So it won't quite be that team in the lead this time, given the Republican majority in the House now. To give you a look at Jefferson County, because we always have people pop by who care, what's happened here is Franklin County has an internal district and also shares one running south with Anderson and Washington and parts of Shelby. Shelby is the other part of that setup. Jefferson has 16 internal districts and shares 3. And Oldham and Bullitt, who are in on that sharing, each have an internal district with their county seat and a district that's shared. And Nelson County with Bardstown was the right size to be its own district. In the central region, this begins to have hints of salamander, I agree. But we managed to structure this as Fayette County has 6 internal districts, 3 of them inside New Circle, and then shares with Bourbon and Scott, with Clark, and with part of Madison. And Madison is connected to a whole set of other counties. Jessamine, Garrett, and Mercer were made into their own small rural world. And Scott County has an internal district, but is part of that district shared with Bourbon. So that's a more coherent, it doesn't have daggers driven through the middle of it.
Susan, here's another question. Can you add these maps to Dave's redistricting site /app?
I don't know. We can certainly share the links to District R, and I understand there's a way to export the data that can go into other programs. I haven't tried that at all, but we can certainly share those links if someone else wants to try. And boy, would it be fun to have someone show us, oh, here's how it would look. I don't know how to do it, but we can certainly share the starting tool of the District R links. Those are fun, by the way. When you go to one of our links, you can't alter it, but you can save the map and make it your own, and then you can play to your heart's content and maybe find the solutions to the puzzles I've been working on. With that much of a view of the House, let me say again how much we want your input. With the Q&A option you're already using, with the tiny URL option for the survey, with the email option, and again, we'll be taking thoughts through at least November 15. I'm going to have to get down to working on the maps after that, so I don't want to promise we can absorb all of it after the 15th, but we'll be aiming to learn everything we can from people who send us thoughts. And then I'll move slowly toward the state Senate. The state Senate map with just 38 districts is a little easier to look at. A thing you might notice, first you notice none of these districts look like absurd Disney characters. There are states where districts do look like Disney characters. But if you look to the east, you see a whole set of districts that run from the Tennessee border north almost to the Ohio River. And they look sort of like strings of pearls with one county after another. And there are some that do similar things elsewhere in the state. Gallatin County is in a district that goes all the way down to Woodford County as a local example. And a number of these places you look at think that it really have to be that way. I will mention, sometimes it kind of does have to be odd because of this rule about not dividing counties. So in this map, the only divided counties are Fayette, Jefferson, and Kenton. And given that it was possible to make a map that had the right size, dividing only those counties, the Supreme Court rules sort of say you have to do it that way. So to give you a close-up of some of how this works, Boone 10 years ago was the right size to be its own district in the state Senate. That isn't true anymore because of that giant growth that Karen mentioned. Boone has to be redistricted and has to be split up because there are too many people. If that sounds frustrating to Boone County folks, I'll mention that the big reason for that is if all of you were in a district, your votes would be worth less, right? There would be too many of you voting. Your representative would be representing more people than other places. And your votes would have less value in influencing how the legislature works. Kenton did have to be divided. So it has one district to the north that's its own, and then another that runs through Kenton and down into Grant and down from there into Scott. And Campbell shares a district with Pendleton and Bracken. So that's how it's being done now. For our Senate maps, we just went for 2 regions. And we'll focus tonight with the eastern region that includes your northern counties. So as a first overview here, what's happening with divided counties, Fayette is divided, Boone and Kenton are divided in the Senate. Fayette has 2 internal districts and shares 2 others with nearby counties. Boone has its own district and shares another in that strong pink color that you can see. And Kenton has a district of its own and shares one with Campbell, and also has a part of that pink district that sweeps down to the south and west along the river. But we can do a little better close-up here. Here's a close-up to see those as a district for Boone that's fully for Boone, and a district that's fully for Kenton, and a district that rounds up Campbell to the right size, and a district that works with that whole set of adjacent counties. That's an attempt to make it simpler. I am sure it is not perfect, and I would love for people who know this geography to give me feedback on, you put 2 communities together who really don't want to be together, or you crossed and divided a line of a community that deserves more coherence. And I will try very hard to work with that insight if anyone has that kind of thought to share with me. I will mention to the west, there are 2 more divided counties. Warren County was too big and got divided, so it has a district that belongs pretty firmly to Bowling Green, and then another that belonged to the adjacent counties and has a part of Warren County. And Jefferson County, as our largest county, had to be sliced into multiple parts, so it has 6 districts that are part of its own county, and then shares districts with all but one of its adjacent counties. But that's still not a huge number of combinations, which I hope is more coherent for them. One more time, we would love your input to help us do this better. If folks have questions, I'm happy to go back to any of the other maps. And y'all have already outrun the crowd with sharing puzzles and thoughts and actual suggestions about how to address questions, even though I noticed that you had different views on how to work with Franklin County and whether including it would be helpful or not. So I thank you. And I think we are ready to turn it back to Karen.
Susan, there's
you,
one
Susan.
more thought here.
Huh?
Or question, the lines within counties are primary roads or rivers?
Primary roads where I could do it. Sometimes, particularly given the many developed areas in the northern counties, it got a little tricky to do anything other than say, I've got to move another 100 people. And I'll be very glad to move over to Maptitude to do it a little more carefully. And it will also show me more clearly the municipal boundaries. Given what has to be moved and trying to keep things contiguous, the main strategy is almost certainly what it's going to need to be. but it can be done better, and all thoughts that will help me do it better will be appreciated. But I was aiming for major roads to make it easy for people to say to one another, here's where things begin and end, and everybody talking about it knows the territory well enough to understand.
Thank you, Susan. We want those questions and comments to keep coming, and don't hesitate to send in any type of question. We're more than happy to work with you. So what can the legislature do to move towards what we consider to be more fair maps? And the key elements are, number one, input. We really want and have worked hard to get citizen opinions through hearings and chances to comment by letter, email, or other modes of communication. We expect transparency. When the legislature draws what they consider to be their final map, we would like those maps to be available to the voting public before the legislators vote on them. When the redistrict lines are done, complete, and have been voted on, those should not be a surprise to any citizen in the state. We also are seeking broad support. We would like to see the legislators build a redistricting plan that can pass with bipartisan support, and do that with substantially more than a simple majority. And by doing that, hopefully we can avoid the lawsuit.
Karen, we had a question. What is the league's strategy in working with the legislature on redistricting? And Cindy Haney said she's going to answer this question actually.
Go
Okay.
for it, Cindy.
All right. Well, Karen is just about to come to part of that strategy. We will be sharing our maps, our recommended maps, with the input that you and others have provided with the legislature prior to their session, unless they go in next week. And we are asking you, the citizens, to help us let legislators know that we do care about what they're doing. So we're asking you to sign the petition that Becky mentioned earlier. We're asking you to provide us with feedback, but we'd also love it if you would contact your legislators, let them know that you're paying attention and that you do care about these district lines, and that you would like them to be fair, and you would like the process to be open. So that's our biggest strategy, is to connect with legislators with public input and public comments that we do care about what they're doing.
So what I would add to that is the most important aspect of our strategy is to hold these forums across the state. As Becky said in the introduction, we've been doing virtual forums in all 6 congressional districts. It had been our desire for the state legislators to hold listening sessions, open hearings, and have them solicit information and thoughts from citizens. When it looked like that wasn't going to happen, we stepped up and we have done that job. So we now need citizens to carry on with us, to reach out to state legislators and say, here's our thoughts. I saw a forum, I've looked at maps, and please consider citizen input in making your decision. Next slide, please. So again, here we have how we would love to have all citizens help us to have people-powered fair maps. So you can send a message, email, call this 1-800 number. When you call that number, very helpful people always answer. They take down your comments. They ask who you want your comments to be sent to, what particular senator or House representative, and they assure that that happens. So don't hesitate to call that 1-800 number. Sign
Karen,
the petition. Yes?
Sorry, I have a question for Susan in the chat or in the Q&A. How many incumbents are drawn out of their current districts via the proposed maps?
I don't know. I was.
It's an excellent question though, isn't it?
Oh, it's a superb question. And I have meticulously not tried to be systematic. I know that in the US Congress seats, I moved 3 members of Congress out of the districts they currently serve. I didn't do it on purpose, but when it got done, it occurred to me to look up where one of them lived, and the newspaper told me the other, and I went, oh. That probably is an effect of previous legislatures having done a lot of gerrymandering. That if the districts hadn't been so stretched out, it would not have been as much so. But after that, for the Kentucky Senate and the House, I genuinely do not know, other than to say that my representative district is unchanged. Boyle County is combined with Casey. We're the right size to be together. There is no other county that is the right size for Boyle to be with. So we're sticking. So that's one incumbent I didn't displace. But I genuinely do not know the impact on any of the others. And I'm trying to virtuously hide from knowing. I was asked once to try drawing the district, changing one thing to put someone back in their district. And I thought and said, the league board will have to order me to do that in a properly called meeting, because I want to be able to say, I didn't even try to work on that. And that was in order to be backing the principle we set out to follow. So I don't know the impact.
That is an excellent question. Thank you, Susan.
Yes.
If you go on our website, LWVKY.org, you will see that you can listen to forums we've held in other parts of the state, if that's of interest to you. You can encourage your friends, family, coworkers to get interested in this. Go on our website and listen to this forum if they didn't sign up for it, and look at the maps and send us input. We want more information from you so that Susan, when she sits down to work on those final recommended maps, she has lots of information to consider. Next slide. So how can you reach us directly? You can always email us at info@lwvky.org for questions or feedback. You can call our office in Louisville, and the number's there. You could look at our website, again, lwvky.org. Use the tiny URL to comment through November 15th. And then we have a QR on this slide, which is the QR for our app, Outreach Circle. And we use that to do very fast, informative communication with people. What you can do is take a picture of this QR and then load the app onto your phone, and you will get messages and communications from the league on a continuing basis, and alerts. We could send out an action alert and say, they're going to be looking at maps tomorrow, email your representative and senator, or something like that. So we encourage people to use Outreach Circle as much as possible. And now I think it goes back to Mark.
Well, thank you, Karen and Susan, for the presentation. And it's been great also to have the feedback from the audience. And as was noted during the presentation, there's opportunity for ongoing feedback. So make sure that your voice is part of this process. I also want to say on behalf of the forum that we have some upcoming events. If you're interested in public affairs, I think these will interest you. On November the 18th, we'll be I have a really great panel talking about the refugee situation and how it is playing out in our region and our state. And that December 2nd, by the way, actually should be December 1st. Apologies for that. But and then hold the date in February. The forum has had a annual forum with state legislators, and we'll be doing that on President's Day. And we're finalizing the details of that. And Al Cross, who many of you know, the longtime political journalist, will be our moderator. So hope you can join us for these upcoming events, and follow the forum at our webpage, nkyforum.org, and on Facebook. And again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, and especially the Northern Kentucky chapter. And I welcome the Northern Kentucky chapter to our community to sort of up the game and civic engagement in our community. It's really pretty nice. So thanks, everyone, and thanks for joining us.
May I jump fast and put up one thing that's been requested in question? Someone asked us to put the QR code up again, and I wanted to get in before we came to the closing.
Excellent.
I hope you've been motivated by this webinar to support Fair Maps in Kentucky. And remember, go to the League's webpage and sign our Fair Maps petition at LWVKY.org. And while you're there, become a League member. Lastly, you can find and follow the Northern Kentucky League of Women Voters on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at LWVNKY. You're invited to come and grow with us. Thanks to our presenters and monitors for all your preparation and leadership, to Mark Nykirk and the Northern Kentucky Forum for co-hosting, to State League Director Jennifer Jackson, who served as our webinar manager tonight, and to everyone who joined us to make this an exceptional event. Good night.